We're picking up from the story with Dr. George Carolay and Andrei Taran, and we're continuing with how do you say that?
Simferopol.
Simferopol, okay. And I'll let you take over from here since you know how.
Unless you want Andrei to put a trill on that R for you.
Hole. Anyway.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Break it down real quick, if you don't mind.
You mean in a real way or in a?
For us to learn. Break it down.
The real way.
The real way?
Yeah.
Simferopol.
Simferopol.
Simferopol. Yeah.
Simferopol.
With a soft L in the end.
Soft L. Okay. We could be here forever.
Just a little entertaining little tidbit.
So one of the areas of ministry by extension for Tabatha included prison ministries. And Andrei, would you tell something about that?
Yeah, we mentioned that mental hospitals, but Russian and overall ex-Soviet Union types of prison are real hell, if you want to tell me. People, by getting there, in no way they become any better. You probably heard recently there was big leaking in news of what has been going on recently in one of the Russian prisons. But anyway, if you didn't, good for you, really. But just so you know, it's the same kind of a system in Ukraine, in Russia. It's very, very, very tough for the people just to survive there and not go crazy, not to lose your identity, so to speak, is almost impossible. Wow. So anyway, there was a lady in our church her name was, wasn't Lisa, I hope she's good these days, Lena Filipyeva, who ran that prison ministry. She literally visited different prisons all over the Crimea and talked to the prisoners, helped in different ways she could. And she approached us one time with a request, can we help those guys at least with the clothing? And, sure enough, I went there a couple of times with her. I saw how they live. I saw the needs with my own eyes there. And not only we were able to donate the clothing, but also, we donated some money just to support that ministry, actually monthly, because Elena was really struggling just to make the ends meet. She didn't have a job for a while, but then she had it back again. She was a doctor. But anyway, her salary was not high enough for her to really keep going, with her job and dedicate so much time also to the prison ministry. So we decided just to support financially the ministry that she was involved with. And for a number of years, we supported her and the, her target auditorium, so to speak, the prisoners there with the clothing, and not only the clothing. That's, to make this story short.
Now, you went to a church with her one time, right?
Yeah. That trip to the church, I actually went. She asked me to take along my guitar and actually make a little concert for them, so to speak. I mean, I sang a few Christian songs, so we use it as a evangelism also to try to touch those guys. And had quite a good conversation with a couple of guys after that. There's very many open hearts there, and you cannot believe how many people end up there in Russian prison without even being guilty because of the way the lawlessness works there. Anyway, another long story.
And was her ministry called I Believe?
I Believe, yeah. I Believe. This is literally an old Russian Soviet story about a doctor who loved everybody, loved every animal. So the animals came to him, and this name, I Believe, actually literally translates from Russian as a doctor hate hurts. I believe only when something hurts us, we say I believe. So doctor hate hurts basically. I have no idea why she chose that name for her ministry, but I mean, apparently there was a number of hurting people in that ministry. So she decided to go with the name from an old Russian book for children and use it for what she's been doing. Anyway, yeah.
Then there were a number of one-off ministries. We didn't do it regularly. But like quite often, people turn to Andrei for transportation services, especially when they had a small group for the van. Camps. Tabatha helps support a number of camps, retreats. Oh, what about the hotline? For a while, there was a hotline, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a hotline in Simferopol that's been active for 2 or 3 years, and its manager, Irina was her name, she came to one of our, I can't remember if she came straight to our board meeting or who and how I was introduced to her, but anyway, bottom line, she told me about what they were planning to be doing and were actually doing. They rented just a one-room apartment and made a call center there where anybody could call with any problems. And they got very, very many calls of, pre-suicidal people who were ready to jump off the balcony or flop their veins or, whatever, just because they didn't see any meaning in their life anymore. And very many of them were stopped, actually, not just stopped, but they heard the gospel through that call center. Several Christians were working for that ministry. Irina was its director, and we actually paid for that for the rent of that apartment, of the whole base, and a little bit more on top of that to Irina, so she should be able to continue with that ministry. So that's another example of what the idea of selling the clothing, not just receiving the clothing as a donation, can do. Because if we didn't have any means to sell that clothing, but just got it as a humanitarian aid, there would be no way to cast our nets that broad, so to speak, because we would have no money to support people like that and ministries like that. But since we were able to accumulate quite a good profit, actually, 1 year we donated our combined donation. Was it 2007 or 2008? One of our good years before it started to go down because of reasons that were not up to us, government issues. But anyway, we donated about $50,000 to different, Christian projects, people in need, just for feeding hungry people off the street. So all of it combined, projects, private people, and things like a lifeline, we were actually able to do with the profit we made.
Yeah, sometimes when I told people in the States in those earlier years, like when we had 5 containers in 1 year, and folks were talking about 40-foot high cube containers, right?
Yeah, 35,000 pounds of clothing in each, roughly.
So we had some very profitable times that blew our minds, and certainly people I talked to in the U.S., that they couldn't believe that their good used clothing could command that. But of course, it was volume. The pieces would sell for a whole lot less than you'd pay for them in the U.S. And we had to recover the cost of shipping and the cost of customs. Andrei, say something about customs in Odessa and Simferopol.
Oh boy! Well,
we're not talking about this. We are talking about a custom, a tradition among the custom officers. Just so you know, the recent news from Ukraine, from a renewed Ukraine that is trying to become a part of a European Union, so to speak, is basically has been proven that $37 billion are being stolen. Well, not brought into the Ukrainian budget because they're being stolen along the way, and a big chunk of that amount,
Wow.
billion dollars.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we're taking a loan from the West, for our country just to survive. If all that money were actually ending up in our budget, Ukraine would have been what it's supposed to have been, and what it actually is, a very rich country potentially. But anyway, so the big chunk of that theft up to this day, George, goes through the customs, because of the customs. It's being stolen basically at the customs. So we had to deal with those crooks every time they wanted a bribe from us, every time. Whenever the shipment hits the Odessa port, there would be several groups of people just jumping around us, waiting for the money. And then when it comes to Simferopol, another story. Anyway, I don't want to go into the details of how I handled it, but it took a lot of effort on my part to handle that. I didn't want to really compromise the ministry and what I've been doing. So, but it was a very, very tough to deal with them. But at the end, like in 2012 to 2013, when we had that new president, Viktor Yanukovych, who finally, worked as a reason for our revolution in Ukraine, because he was unbearable and the government was crazy. Nothing but the crooks were under him. Custom was so crazy that, whatever they required of us, breaking our hands 10 years before, well, they wanted, I wouldn't say 10 times more, but at least 6 to 7 times more, just to let the container, through the customs. So I said, guys, I was able to handle you before, but I'm not going to be willing to do that anymore. So I realized in early 2013 that it's probably going to be our last shipment, because they were killing us. They were basically killing us. So.
Yeah, you think of how if something feels unfair business-wise, you go to the legal authorities about it. But
they are part of it.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. And when Yanukovych was ousted, and after that coup, after revolution in Ukraine, they figured out that $70 billion were missing from Ukrainian budget, just stolen like that. Because if you let he was a prisoner. He was an ex-prisoner. So if you let the thief, come to power, what do you expect?
Yeah.
And like I wrote George recently, unlike in Russia where they have no power of vote, you got Putin, you got president forever, you got a Tsar there. In Ukraine, it's actually some kind of a democracy, so people's votes count, and that's how they vote. That's who they elect. So maybe that's who they deserve. I don't know. Really. It was. Anyway, I can speak for hours about it, but
yeah. But then when you think of all the corruptness, you're like, okay, how fair are the votes and everything there?
Well, no, in Ukraine, yeah. I mean, there was a long story during our Orange Revolution in 2004. There was actually proven how many fake votes Yanukovych, people were, and they were caught at that. That's why there was. Re-election. Anyway, yeah, I mean, sometimes you wonder, since I know the history, and maybe somebody can prove me wrong, but, I know the Russian, Ukrainian, that region's history enough to claim that not for a day, not for an hour, there was any real democracy at work for real in this country. And especially long enough to be ingrained in people's minds and people, to become so much part of their identity as their, slave mentality is up to these days. So I'm wondering, are those such countries that are cursed forever until the second coming and nothing can grow in them? Because potentially it's possible. Not only it's possible to change things around, it's possible to do it very fast. I mean, even I can give you a list of what needs to be done in Ukraine without any political experience, maybe some business experience. What should be done in Ukraine to turn it completely around in, say, like 5 years into a very, very prosperous country. But you have to stop corruption, you have to stop stealing, you have to, have a totally different relationship with Russia. If Ukraine could be moved geographically from under Russian belt somewhere far away, would have had more chance. Anyway, geopolitics and so on and so forth. But it's still, those are secondary issues. Most of all, people just don't have it. But then again, if I say people don't have it in them, I'd be wrong, because quite a number of people have it in them to be hardworking, to be purpose-driven. Well, I do consider myself to be one of them, but I left the country because I had no room to grow there and develop anymore.
Sure.
But those kind of people apparently are in a deep minority compared to the rest who don't care or are not ready to work enough, or just hope for the Tsar or for the oligarch or for whatever kind of a professional clown who's a president right now to change their life around for them. Anyway, let us stop, George. I'll go too far.
One of the ways that the customs people in Odessa tried to put the screws to Andrei was to keep stalling. So like Andrei would have to pay for a hotel for yet another day, and he would have to pay storage on the container that they were holding up, waiting for the bribe.
Wow.
So it's like, after a while, it's a no-win situation. You might have been clever, you might have been blessed, you might have whatever, worked through it and minimized it, but then there comes a time that people are too greedy and you can't do business. And this is just, it wasn't just Tabatha, it's just typical with a lot of businesses, where those who wanted those businesses and were in positions of power, they found ways. Everybody's broken some law. There's enough laws created for that purpose that they can snap and get you. And so they have some legal pretense, and there you go. It's really a tough environment. And there was a period where it was looking pretty good for Ukraine overall, I think, while I was there. And then it just took a turn back to where it was and deeper, maybe.
Actually, back in 2003, Ukrainian economy was considered to be the fastest growing in Europe, just for one short period of summertime or whatever. Then,
so what was the change? What do you think caused that?
Well, during President Kuchma, for example, when we just first started the ministry, we did not have that system of flat tax where you just paid a certain amount of money per month, and then the rest of profit is yours up to a certain gross income. Mm-hmm. But then, President Kuchma back in 2001 or even 2000, he allowed for that kind of a system. So taxation system was much more balanced to encourage the small businesses to actually grow and get out of the shadow and pay their taxes and develop. And it showed in each and every different aspect of Ukrainian economy, and it really helped it to grow. But then again, the flat tax system remained, but they came up with so many side taxes that the business, slipped back into the shadow again, and the whole thing. Anyway, oligarchs, corruption took its course, and Ukraine slowed down big time. But then again, world crisis hit us very hard too. Like back in 2008, we felt that very big time.
It was palpable about everywhere, I think.
I have a question, if you don't mind. So here in the States, I'm used to fellow Christians, some aren't this way, but kind of say there's a separation of, church and state, don't get involved in politics and all. And there's definitely a wrong way to do that and have it as an idol or something like that. But hearing this story in the background, it's clear that the political environment impacts your ministry, your life, everything, like how it was over there. So how do you navigate that with wisdom where you can talk about that, but not compromise your essential belief?
Well, it's
especially as an outsider.
Yeah, to me, everything boils down to the personal level. See, like me, for example, I faced a very real, human being. He's a customer officer who says, Andrei, give me so much and so much money, and you go. So I have to sit down with him and talk, Maxim, whoever you are, do you realize who we are? We are Christian ministry. We are helping people. You want the money who could have gone otherwise to support this and that. I am myself. Anyway, tell short of a story of how I may look to you like a very rich businessman who drove Mercedes Mini went to your office, but in fact I am just getting the salary, and anyway, tell them a story and see if it breaks the guy. And more often than not, it actually did, because they are human beings. And actually, when like I said back in 2012 under Yanukovych, they really demanded like almost $3,000 or something like that just to let our container through the customs. Even the brokers themselves are, Andrei, we apologize, we're so sorry, but it's not up to us really. They just tell us from above, the custom local custom office's director, it comes from him, and nobody can do anything against him because he has the connections so up high, and I said, but do you realize, guys, that, you will not see me again because my business is probably going to be dead because of them, killed? Well, there's nothing we can do. So you have to balance, you have to weigh out and see, how far can you allow yourself to go as a Christian without, compromising your faith, and then, what you're going to gain and what you're going to lose once you make a certain step or you choose not to make a certain step. Mm-hmm. No, guys, I never told you that I paid any bribes to anybody. It's very important. No. Okay? I have to balance. That's all I said.
Just so everybody knows.
Yeah, so everybody hears that. Okay, so
mentioning Andrei about 99, about how the name Tabatha was appropriately named because it was almost like
we actually
came back to life. So I was curious about that.
You got to give it to George, just the fact that we restarted later because back in 1999, like I said, that system of a flat tax, in the law we call it, wasn't active yet, so I had to register a company called Intertextile, and we had to, and once if you choose to be honest and not hide any income and pay all of the taxes, your taxes would eat up to like 75 to 80% of your gross income. That's crazy. So we started a company, and Southeast Christian Church, I believe, was that collected our very first shipment, and we received that, and we started working. I got my very, very first shop there. We did not really sell in bulk back then. Basically what happened in about 3 to 4 months, I realized that I'm not making enough profit to even be able to pay for that container, to pay for that shipment, let alone to pay for the store's rent, for people's salary, and so on and so forth. So we basically had to close the doors and claim a bankruptcy. So business died, and not only died, I owed several $1,000s according to my contract back to the U.S. To Southeast Christian Church who sent that shipment. So we were in total flop. I mean, I was really, really desperate, not sure what to do. It was total collapse. So it's like, well, what I'm saying, like Tabatha, we died. We were dead. Then thanks to George and to people he contacted in the U.S. and Southeast Christian Church again, in particular, they have collected the another shipment for us, and George was able to come up with $3,000 for us to clear the customs on that container, on that shipment. And luckily, from the year of 2000, the system of flat tax became active. So I thought, okay, with that flat tax, you just sit down, you count, and you realize you're probably gonna make it, and remaining profit will be much, much greater than it was under that company. So I had to close that first company, receive that second shipment, or first shipment as an independent business person. And from that point, it started growing. I sold almost the whole container in bulk, and I brought back to money and paid whatever I owed to George within the first couple of months, and then made enough money to clear the customs on the next container. And so it started coming, shops growing, people coming, and growing like a snowball. But all of it was not only started, but it was basically restarted, resurrected, like a dead Tabatha came back to life again. That's why the name did us so well.
Yeah, good story. Yeah.
I'm looking at a December 1999 report to my board about Carolay's goals for 2000. The first is about the college, then about the conferences, and then the church, and then other. And under other is Tabatha, or here it just says clothing ministry. And then there was a radio ministry and publication ministry. I was heading up the publication ministry in those days. I had not turned it over to Golovin yet. And consulting ministry, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes it's good we have something in writing to remember what happened, especially when it happened. Well, the interesting thing about this I'm bringing up is that there was an exchange between two people on Facebook. This Ron Bottager had been over for one of the visits, Western visits to Crimea, and he had communicated something about a photo that I had made of a waterfall in North Carolina. It is a beautiful photo. And my name was mentioned. And so this other guy, Shilnut, asks, is this the George Carley that, and then he describes things, oh, yeah, that's the one. And then he says, is he still in ministry, or did this happen? What happened, so forth? And so then I updated him. Well, he was an elder at the new church, Northeast Christian Church in the Atlanta area, that agreed to pay for the first container after our long year and to collect clothing. And he remarked about how difficult it was to fill up a container that size. But they filled it up and they paid for it. And that enabled us to get back on our feet.
Wow.
Now, my own board had said, George, we gave you permission for this first one to pay for the shipping and everything. And basically, I was told, but you failed. Because at the end of the year, you did not have the money to pay for the next one. And how do we know that if we use TMI's funds to go ahead and pay for another container, it won't be the same story? The compromise was, we will not use TMI funds to ship another container. However, if you find some other churches who would designate funds for that, we will not oppose that. Now, I won't go into that because there's some funny things to think about that. We won't use our money. But if you get somebody else to read it, use their money, it's okay with us. Which is like saying, maybe somebody else will have more faith and trust in you than we do.
Yeah.
You know? And
you don't believe in that.
And the guy, I'd baptized this fellow, he'd been an atheist. I baptized him into Christ. And he was on his way to represent to Tabatha ministry one night when he had a stroke and died. Wow. He was from the Atlanta area. And I'll just not mention his name right now, but his heart was in the right place, but he was a businessman and he was not going to throw good money after bad. But Northview came through and we got on our feet, and then Southeast Christian Church, Louisville, helped out. And anyway, again, and it picked up momentum. But it was like that close to dying due to a number of factors, but you got to say, yeah, the taxation. Is it possible to tax a business so much that they actually don't have profit? It's worse than that. The taxes can be so great that it will take all of what would have been profit, and then you have to go borrow the money from someplace to pay the rest as they say owe you. So talk about being business unfriendly. We had a president that I think was business unfriendly. I'm not mentioning his name, but his initials are. But, it's like they didn't understand. Okay, so the oligarchs, the people who are connected, they could make the money and get filthy rich. But as far as laws and an approach that would help the common person and so forth, who cared? Who cared? Who cared? And my mind thinks about all kinds of things that maybe later I'll talk again about our contract with Disney for our students. And Andrei was in on that first visit that we did to Disney World, and we set this up. And yet other universities in our town in Simferopol, there are quite a few of them, none of them were interested in being a part of this, recruiting students for a paid internship in the U.S. for 6 months or a year, because it was like, well, what's in it for me? What will I get out of it? Will I get a ticket to the Disney World? And so it's like, yeah, but your students will, but there was no sense of competition that, if you come with our university, you have this opportunity to do this internship. So, I mean, it was like pulling your hair out so many ways.
Yeah.
But I'm all right.
I know you mentioned earlier that it could be dangerous to show initiative. And I wanted to ask you what you meant on that, because I know some of that can be culturally related.
Do we not have that expression in the U.S.? Initiative is always punishable? Maybe not. I heard that.
As much. I know culturally over there, it really can be.
I heard that in Ukraine.
Yeah, detriment.
That could go on back to like under the communist period. You weren't supposed to take initiative. Mm-hmm. Like if you were a good, bright student, you really shouldn't do that in a way in your classroom that, you cut out in some way. It was the community. And you got to be careful about rising above the community. Yeah. And somebody decides to renovate their apartment some way, and they don't touch any walls that are load bearing, but yet they get in trouble because you should have got approval for this, and you should have paid for this approval for this. First apartment we lived in, they put the kitchen in another room, and then neighbors ratted on them, and they had to put the kitchen back in where it was formerly.
That's a lot of work with the kitchen.
No wonder they immigrated to Israel, and we got to rent their apartment.
Kitchen on wheels.
You're not supposed to take initiative. And so you can imagine on students then that grew up in that, it's really hard for them, and you never question the professor. But in the U.S., we invite that. That's give and take. And this
that's why I wanted to sit on that for a second, because for us in the U.S., that's kind of foreign. We're supposed to show initiative and ambition.
I was going to say it might depend on the pocket of the U.S.
Maybe.
Because where I grew up.
I had one of my students that I would say that then went in the work study program and then became on the staff that was particularly slow at exercising initiative. Hmm. And, I have to be sensitive to cultural influences.
Sure, yeah.
But on top of that, people are different. Mm-hmm. So you have these things. And for some people then, to help them realize that this is a cultural, my mind's fleeting now to where some people are saying in the U.S., that being punctual, taking initiative, doing math, that's a white person's thing. That's racist. Some of you know what I'm talking about. It's ridiculous. And so, okay, leaving that line. So it took longer for this student to take responsibility. They were responsible for what they were told to do, but it's like they didn't see what they need to do next, or they were just too lazy to do it.
Yeah.
But in time, this person became a very good, capable staff person and with initiative.
Yeah.
But it was something to be learned. But you see, it was safer. It's safer. Just do what you're told.
Right.
Because someone's going, well, who told you to do that?
Don't sit.
And sometimes when you express initiative, you do something, it's like get a pat on the back. Other times it's like, that was foolish or stupid and you shouldn't have done it.
Right.
And so we always, if we're in leadership, we have to decide how do we encourage people to take initiative, but on the other hand, don't do something ridiculous or foolish or go spending my money without asking me or whatever, So, cultural issues, but then you have your individual issues. But for some people, the culture has shaped them so much. And how many times did some people say, George, trust me, give me X number of dollars and I'll make a lot for you. And they were going to invest in this. I said, well, show me a business plan. What's a business plan? Well, it's this and this and this. It's like, well, just trust me. I promise. Well, in a culture where people are used to smaller groups and in their circles, they could probably do that because you would know who was trustworthy and who wasn't within that group. Anyway, it's just another cultural thing that I had to work around.
Wondering too, Tabatha, did you get pretty much all of your clothing from the States, or how did that work with the
all from the States? Andrei took a trip to Germany to see about getting them from Germany to see, because that would be cheaper transportation wise and so forth, but that didn't really work out well. We had churches that donated the money. In some cases, the clothing. Some places, there would be one church that would be the receiving one, and other churches would bring it to that place. And it'd be deposited and then eventually sacked and loaded on, sorted. Sorting was often a big job, and then loaded onto the 40-foot containers. How many bags did you say that would be normally, Andrei?
About 390, something like that.
Wow.
So we're talking about 390 big bags.
Big bags. taller than your waist, probably, from the floor.
And then they were stacked up in a certain way to have no void spaces. And then there was a ministry that eventually helped us with that, called Master Provisions. And they would collect, and then at their warehouse, there would be sorting. Besides the problem with customs, we also in time had lower quality clothing. And as the economy was picking up, more or less, people got used to better things.
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense.
And sometimes they had the money to buy new clothing. And we ended up where it seemed to me that it was the babushkas, the grandmothers that were going to buy clothing for their family and grandkids and so forth. And the others were like, okay, we're above that now. But then the economy got bad again, and it was like, do we go back? Do we do this or what?
Sure.
And then there became a lot more clothing stores too, greater competition.
Was it ever an issue that it was an American style clothing? You know, the style of clothing can kind of differ at times.
I don't know if there's a question about American style, but sometimes people did say that the styles that we had were old now. So there's a difference between I need a shirt on my back.
Right.
I need an Azad shirt on my back or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't know how that would work, because sometimes, like, if we got clothes from somewhere else here in the States and it was out of the States, sometimes it's kind of exotic, but it doesn't sound like kind of the opposite there.
You know, some stores advertised that they had European clothes.
Right.
But
the
word American, people either loved or hated America, regardless of what they knew or they didn't know. They had a preconceived idea. And so I would say American clothes was attractive until they found out it was made in China. But, you know. But I want to say one other thing. It's this other idea that came to my mind about when Andrei was talking about difficulties. The director of our college, Ukrainian founder, he mentioned meeting her, Emily Timchenko, or Emily Vladimirovna.
That sounds like bloody murder.
Yeah, there you go.
When I say
with that.
that she was trying to push me out, take over the college from the American founders, etc. And so she started passing around some rumors. And in the midst of this, she came to me and said, you know, if you're involved with that clothing, that Tabatha at all, you should know that you could get in really bad trouble. Because, you know, they're going to get in really bad trouble. They're breaking the law. I says, how's that, Emily? I already could guess. She said, well, that's humanitarian aid, and you cannot sell humanitarian aid. You're right, Emily. That is, that you cannot sell humanitarian aid. But that wasn't imported as humanitarian aid. People gave it. But when it left U.S., it was a business contract. And not only was shipping paid by Tabatha, but so was the taxes. So were the taxes. And she said, no, it's humanitarian aid. Back to, you know, when we first started talking about things, about the emphasis on missions and missionary life and working overseas, cross-cultural and so forth, you really have to keep your focus on what's your main purpose. Because there's going to be a lot of things to derail you, to detract you. And some of them are pretty serious. The usual things are health issues and financial issues and marital issues. But then you have these cross-cultural issues. And then you have some people who, it's not that you're paranoid, they really are out to get you.
Yeah.
So, well, I want to wrap this up then. This has gone a lot longer than I expected. So for those of you who have endured to this point, I hope that you found it interesting and worth the journey. Tabatha transformed used clothing into transformed lives, giving hope to the hopeless, help to the helpless. You heard some of the stories, some of the dire situations. Doing what Jesus called us to do, visiting those in prison, taking care of the sick, and so forth. The students, I'll talk about some of those students in the near future and what God has done through them. But many students have gone on to various ministries. Some are involved in businesses. Some are married and have a number of children now, and those children are about to have children. I can't believe that. One has a couple of masters and 2 doctorates since college. I have enduring relationships from our 25 years in Crimea that I will carry with me until eternity. So only God knows what all Tabatha accomplished. But when we review, we see that he was doing a lot, but we also know that he will have done a lot more than what we saw. Now, I did say that I would, at the end, say other things about Andrei. So if we have a couple of minutes for that. Andrei has a sonorous voice, meaning deep, a certain richness to it. So it's a good voice for a public speaker, or for the reader of a script, or for an actor. And Andrei was also an actor for a time. You want to say something about that, Andrei?
It was a role, playing the father of a girl who became pregnant outside of marriage, of course, and how he handled it. And the father is a professor, an atheist with a certain mindset. So, different characters shown from different perspectives, the relationship within one family and so on and so forth.
Something else to mention about Andrei, he went on to get a master's degree after Crimean American College.
Awesome.
That was in international marketing, Andrei?
Yeah, international marketing and advertisement from Kiev. Yeah.
Wow.
And he was preaching at the Simferopol Christian Church, and he was teaching his staff at the warehouse.
Wow. Yeah, we've been doing every Tuesday morning. We would have a Bible classes there for staff. Nothing formal, but just take a certain book of a Bible or a certain chapter, or sometimes just a certain theme, and talk about life. How is it applicable to our lives here and now? I try to make it as practical as possible. More often than not, it was me teaching those lessons, but sometimes we would invite somebody from outside. Sometimes George taught for us, or some other missionaries, or some other people. Anyway, it was fruitful, I hope, for the team building experience.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say about him is his proficiency in language. You can hear how well he speaks English.
Yeah, deep accent. I'm sorry about that.
And of course, he speaks Russian. And I don't know about his level of fluency, but Ukrainian and Belarusian.
Belarusian barely, but Ukrainian, yeah, I guess I'm good with that. Yeah.
And he used to translate for a German pastor, so his German was good.
Yeah, I spoke German years ago.
Wow.
So, and the other remarkable thing about him is that when none of the newscasters could properly pronounce the title or the name of that volcano in Iceland that interfered with air traffic, he could say it.
Yeah.
To this day. Well, this has been fun. I hope, I don't know if our listeners could have had as much fun as we did, but especially in Andrei and I, reconnecting our Tabatha life and memories. So I'm glad that you happened to be available for us, Andrei.
It was a pleasure. Yes. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for.